Welcome to the Unshackled Life Podcast. Real talk about faith, freedom, and following Jesus. I'm Dalen Woodard, and I'm glad you're here. Whether you've been walking with Jesus for years or you're just trying to figure out what's real in a noisy world, this space is for honest conversation, raw reflection, and truth that sets us free. Let's get into today's episode. Whether you're listening on New Year's Eve or sometime after, this is one of the moments on the calendar that naturally invites reflection. We look back on what's been. We look ahead to what's coming. And often, whether we realize it or not, we're asking the question, how do I move forward well? I want to slow that question down a bit and let Scripture reframe it. We're going to be in Hosea chapter 11. I want to read just one verse. We'll keep the context in mind. Yet it was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up by their arms, but they did not know that I healed them. Hosea 11:3. That last phrase is what I want to sit with. They did not know that I healed them. God is speaking through the prophet Hosea as a father speaking to his children, Israel, called here by the name Ephraim, because Ephraim was the largest and leading tribe of the northern tribes of Israel that had split away from Judah in Israel's civil war after the death of Solomon. This isn't courtroom language. This isn't condemnation. This is relational grief. God's saying, I was the one who taught you how to walk. I was the one who carried you. I was the one who healed you. And yet, you didn't know it. Not because God hadn't acted, not because it wasn't obvious the miraculous things he did, but because Israel failed to recognize and remember what he had done. This is one of the most subtle and dangerous spiritual conditions we can fall into. Israel benefited from God's healing. They lived in the fruit of his deliverance. They walked in the freedom he provided. But they didn't understand where it came from. And when grace goes unrecognized, something happens in the human heart. We begin to assume independence where there should be dependence. We begin to rely on ourselves when we were meant to rely on God. We begin to drift, not because we hate God, but because we forget him. This is how spiritual compromise begins, not with rebellion, but with forgetfulness. Israel didn't wake up one day and say, we don't need God anymore. What happened was slower than that. They slowly began to believe, we're strong now. We're established now. We're fine. But they were standing in a healing they didn't acknowledge and walking in a freedom they didn't remember was given and not earned. And when people forget how they were healed, they start believing they healed themselves. The pattern continues because this isn't just an Old Testament issue. Paul asked the Galatians, having begun by the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh? Galatians 3:3. It's the same issue in a different covenant. We receive salvation as a gift, but then we subtly shift into self-effort. We start in grace, but try to continue in grit. We forget that the same God who healed us and freed us from our bondage is the God who sustains us. The end of the year, especially New Year's Eve, is full of reflection and often full of resolve. We think in terms of doing better, trying harder, being more disciplined, fixing what's broken. But Hosea 11:3 gently asks a different question. Do you know that God has healed you? Do you know that He has set you free? Because your answer to those questions will shape how you walk into the new year. If you don't recognize God's healing, you'll try to manage life in your own strength. If you forget how you were freed, you'll start rebuilding chains you were never meant to carry again. Before Israel needed correction, they needed remembrance. Before we talk about goals, habits, or direction, we need clarity. You didn't save yourself. You didn't heal yourself. You didn't free yourself. God did. And the Christian life doesn't move forward by becoming self sufficient, it moves forward by remaining God dependent. As we step into a new year, the call isn't to prove ourselves, it's to walk like children, aware of the arms that carried us here, to live from freedom, not for it, to trust the healer, not our habits or even our tools, to remember what God has already done so we don't drift into believing we no longer need Him. Israel didn't fall away because God failed them. They fell away because they forgot Him and what He had already done for them. So, tonight, before the calendar turns, let's acknowledge the healing God has already done. Let's give thanks for the freedom He has already given. And let's step into the new year not leaning on ourselves, but walking in the grace that carried us here. Grace and peace to you, and Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Unshackled Life podcast. If it encouraged, blessed, or challenged you, consider following the podcast and sharing it with someone you feel it might bless or help. Be blessed, and remember, when you fix your thoughts on God and build your thinking on the foundation of His truth, God fixes your thoughts.